It's exhausting pushing away your anger. It's exhausting, holding up some kind of perfection that other people see. And that's really part of the shadow too. It's a lot of our beauty and our brilliance that we don't own ourselves. So confronting the shadow is confronting our own brilliance and really integrating and owning it versus just keep projecting it onto other people. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. I'm Deborah Burnt Maldonado, and I'm here with Dr. Rob Maldonado.
Yeah, good to be back.
And we have a juicy topic today, how to confront your shadow. And for those of you who are our fans, you know how important this is. So we're going to go deep into this topic today. But before we do, I would love to remind you to subscribe to our channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, just click the button in the corner there, click subscribe, hit the bell so you can get those notifications every time we release a new episode, as well as if you are listening to us on the podcast services, iTunes, Spotify, all those wonderful services, make sure you subscribe. We want to be on your spring walks with you and inspiring your mind as you continue your day. So, the shadow. It has such a bad rap, and we're going to show you how you're going to be so excited to face your shadow if you haven't already.
Yeah, and we'd like to dedicate this to all the shadow warriors out there that are doing this incredible work. Yeah, so we want to talk about it's a big topic, but we want to make it practical for everyone. We're going to talk about how we develop and why we develop the shadow, how we protect the shadow and how the ego defends it with its life, and then how we work with it and why everyone should work with the shadow. And
let's begin with the source of this term. The shadow comes from the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. If you're new to our podcast, you probably might be the first time you heard his name with us, but we are definitely very interested in his theory of individuation in a coaching model. And he came up with the term over 100 years ago. And it's basically this idea that a part of our psyche that we can't see. It's a part of ourselves we can't see. So it's not necessarily negative or bad. It gets a bad rap. Some people confuse it with insecurities or our dark side or negative beliefs or limiting beliefs. That's not the shadow. It's much deeper and actually has much more energy. So we're going to go into that. Do you have anything to add about the definition of shadow?
Yeah, that the proper way to understand Jung's work on the shadow is his bigger work of individuation. And individuation is very similar to what Maslow called self-actualization. So self-actualization is kind of expressing the full potential of yourself, your being. That's a lot. But Jung's work goes even beyond that because he was looking for a psychology that matched what he saw in a lot of these spiritual traditions that have been around since the beginning of time for human beings that take people through a transformation. And he found that psychology through his work on individuation, which is let's say a subsection of the totality of his work, because the guy was insane. He wrote continuously volumes and volumes, but his work on individuation was very personal to him. It was his own journey of transformation.
And we all should partake in individuation, because until we do, our life is not our own. And what I love about his work is, if coaching was around back in the day, but even psychology had just been in its infancy, I probably would guarantee that Jung would think individuation is perfect in a coaching model, because it's about potential. It's not about healing the past. It's about moving forward and basically reclaiming all of who you are so you can be fully empowered in life. So great topic. And the first stage is facing your shadow. We talked earlier in our previous episodes about the persona and the ego. And so we're going to just do a quick little review. So when we go into the shadow, if you missed those episodes, go back and listen to them. Really great stuff.
We started with the ego, and the ego's primary functions, two primary functions. One is survival, making sure we get here to this point. The other one is that we fit in socially.
Yes.
Because we're social creatures and we need to collaborate with others. We need to fit in. We need to be accepted by the tribe. And so that's the work of the ego. Very important. So we don't want to get rid of the ego. That's kind of, there's other schools.
You know what I want to say about that too is that a lot of people, like I know for me, when I first started doing personal development, it was like all about fixing the brokenness in my life, and conditioning is actually a natural, necessary function. And so don't confuse personal growth with there's something wrong with you. We're all conditioned by our environment. We're all conditioned by our experiences. And those conditioning elements are part of a healthy mind. And so when we explore our conditioning, I think what I did was kind of like use technique my way through like personal development, and was just working on the parts that I felt broken, or that were wounded, or that were, like not functioning well, instead of looking at my whole self. And I think with individuation and the shadow work that we do is really looking at a person with all of their stuff, not just like going under a microscope and just looking at that one little part of their life that didn't work out for them, right? And then that becomes their whole identity. We actually look at the whole person, and we see that little tiny piece that maybe got a little tripped up in, 5 years old or 10 years old or whenever that happened, is such a tiny part of us. And there's so much more to us. And that's what I love about this kind of work.
That was the first episode. Then we went on to the persona, where we talked about how we are essentially playing a role, wearing a mask. Not that it's not important. Of course it's important. Jung says you have to invest some time to develop a strong ego and a strong persona that allows you to act in the world, to be in the world and be comfortable and go out there and do what you need to be doing. But that's not you, he says. That's not the real you. And that's the mistake most of us make. We're so conditioned to think that if I create a viable persona, I'm done. All I got to do is cruise along, polish up the persona every once in a while, maybe do one of those weekend retreats that we were talking about this morning.
Spiritual retreat, and
I'm good. But that's not going to do it, he says, because you need to integrate the shadow. You need to get down to who are you at the core heart level, at the soul level. And that requires that introspection that we're going to be talking about in shadow work. So in shadow, then the first piece is, why do we need it? How do we develop it? What is it?
Why do we need a shadow? We need a shadow.
Yeah.
Or else we wouldn't be able to function in the world. We would be kind of acting out our worst impulses. And when we think about the ego and its job is for social adaptation and survival, we do need to we're living in this world. We have a physical body. We have to make friends with people. We have to play nice in the world. And there's certain things that we have to do in order to kind of operate in the world. And so that is, the persona is not bad. Just because it's not who we really are, it's okay because it serves a function. Early in life, we need to go out and get married, have a job, have babies, be a good mom, be a bad mom, fail and succeed, and all those things that normal human beings have to go through. And we need a persona to do that. We can't not have a persona. And so if we have a persona, the opposite is our like bizarro self, which is our shadow. So you can't have one half of something. You can't be all good. There has to be its opposite, because we're living in a world of duality.
Yeah, so we think about us as individuals, right? We're kind of thrown into a family. And our job as children, right, as kind of human beings within this group, is to start to identify with certain traits that will allow us to fit into that family, to bond with our mother, our father, our siblings, our peers. And that is the beginning of the work of the persona, that we start to say, this is who I am. I am this one. I am the one that's funny. I am the one that's smart. I am the one that helps everyone, et cetera, et cetera. And so we start to identify as this role that we're playing, and we start to collect this list of traits, characteristics that we feel comfortable identifying with and being identified with.
Sort of like our public resume.
That's right.
If you are ever dated online, what you put on your dating profile is your persona. I am this, I'm this age, I do this for a living, I love to ski, and I like to hike, and I'm funny, and I like this type of music. That's the persona. It's this kind of surface identity.
Whatever doesn't fit into that persona, the building and the constructing of that social persona has to be pushed away. But it doesn't go anywhere, Jung says. It simply goes into the personal unconscious. We push it away, we repress it. And we know repression is a powerful defense mechanism. It's done unconsciously. So what he's saying is, as you're growing up, you're doing this unconsciously. So you're not actively like thinking through this and saying, oh, I choose this and I choose to be this way. It just feels right to you that that's who I want to be. That feels good, and this helps me fit in. It helps me survive. It helps me kind of relate to the people around me and the culture around me.
So, for example, if you live in a household where everyone's really loud, and if you're quiet, you get lost in the mix. So you may create a persona of being a loud person or interrupting, because that's the only way you got attention for survival. And so to be a wallflower, to be, kind of in the back of the room, playing, in the back in the audience, is not really for your survival. You'll be forgotten. So we can create a persona that is boisterous and loud and funny to fit in with everyone. And the opposite can happen too, where the family is very quiet, and then we have to kind of feel like if we're loud, we're kind of shunned. So we have to kind of resonate with the family. So we have these dynamics, and we're not consciously deciding this. Like you said, it's just like unconscious, like, okay, this is how I'm going to survive in this family. This is what I need to do. Women and men, even sexuality, like for women, if there's all boys in the family and the father's praising the boys, and the girl wants to get dad's attention, she may create a persona of more masculine, like tomboy, or, get into business like her dad and push away the frilly, girly stuff and want to be like her brothers to kind of get that adoration. That's just an example. It doesn't always have to play out that way. She could rebel and be super feminine. It doesn't matter. But it's like we get set up in this environment, and we're like, what's going to work for us? And a lot of times it's just guesswork. It's like evolution. It's like, what's going to help me adapt? Let me adjust this way. And a lot of times it's just in those early stages, we're trying to figure out ourselves and our persona in the world. You worked with kids. The kids sometimes evolve a little bit as they're just trying to figure it out as they go to school, and where do I fit in with my friends, and what kind of persona can I bring to class so I'm not beaten up after school, or that I can make friends.
Yeah, a lot of the pain of childhood is that kind of figuring out, who am I? What is my persona? What is the role that I can play in my family, in school, and in my culture at large? So Jung says there's two main functions of the persona. It allows us to leave an impression on others. In other words, it's our calling card. This is who I am, right? When we go to a party, people ask us, who are you? What do you do? This is who I am. This is what I do. That's the persona. But he says the second function is a little bit trickier. We hide behind the persona. We're able to get comfortable putting up that facade, that mask, playing that role, like an actor playing a role. And we hide the true self, the real feelings, the real potential in us.
And not when a lot of people say the true self is more like the inner like voice that they're conscious of. And when we say the true self, it's like the deeper aspects of our psyche that beyond our personality. So it's not just like, oh, I know I'm being this way because I'm insecure. Your true self isn't insecure. It's just kind of a function your persona, your ego created to hide that insecurity to survive. But that's not your shadow. It's still like if you're conscious of it, it's not your shadow. And so a lot of people think that inner narrative and then the persona is the persona's shadow, but the shadow is really unconscious. So you may have that insecurity in your mind, like be conscious of it. You don't show it to the world, but the shadow is something deeper that it takes a little bit to get at because it's not logical. It's why would I hide that? It's something very irrational that you hide. Like we know that makes total sense that I don't want to show my insecurities in public, but what's the irrational piece? And that is the key. And so a lot of people think they do shadow work by reading a book or reading Jung, and they're like, oh yeah, I kind of examined my shadow. But really, truly, you need someone else to kind of help you and ask you questions because the ego is the master of hiding it and keeping it in play. Yeah. Because for those of you who listen and think, how do I know if I really face my shadow? I will say you will know it. There is no mistaking when you're really confronting your shadow, is that it is incredibly uncomfortable. Incredibly uncomfortable, more uncomfortable than the cringe moments you have. It's like incredibly uncomfortable. That's why most people don't do it, but it's incredibly transformational as well.
Yes, that's right. So let's get back to then how does the shadow then begin to impact our life? Because this is what Jung is getting at, that he's saying as we develop this persona and we get comfortable, it's doing us a great service. It's allowing us to interact with others and present ourselves as acceptable people in society, something we all need, of course.
Our good reputation.
Yes, he says, but the shadow is going to be a moral problem for you because you're going to project it outward. One of the main defense mechanisms that the ego uses to protect the shadow is that it says, you are not those things, they are. The people out there, the bad ones, the angry people, the ignorant people, your sister Kate,
the selfish people, the people that go off and make a lot of money, those darn rich people that are stealing money from everyone, conning everyone.
Yes, so this projection, it was well understood in Eastern philosophy as Maya. In other words, what you reject about yourself, you can see it clearly in others, but you don't see it in yourself. It's like a way that the psyche gets rid of the shadow by projecting it outward and saying, it's out there, it's not me.
Like what I was saying is that a lot of people think, oh, it's my insecurities are my shadow. And they call it shadows with an S. It's one place, one shadow, lots of aspects in it. But it's that kind of like, if you know you're insecure and you're hiding it, that's not your shadow. It's the things that you don't know. And what you don't know is running your life. Because if you know it, you're actually making it conscious and it can change. Like Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll think it's fate. Why do I keep meeting angry people? Why do I keep having the same boss all the time that never appreciates me? Why do my relationships never work? Why do I keep getting irritated with friendships and people around me? Like, how come no one can get close to me? I try to make friends and no one wants to be around me. Like, what is that about? And it really is like, what do you judge? Whatever you're projecting on those people is really something you're pushing away and you're creating. And that's the hardest thing, to take that responsibility.
Yes, it's an incredible mechanism, and it makes it appear to the individual that they are correct, that they are perceiving people that are obnoxious, undesirable, or have undesirable traits out there. It's the people in my office, at work, or the next football team, or the next political party, or whatever it is. They're able to identify it. Not in themselves, though, in the other people. That projection then allows this shadow to remain unconscious to the individual. In other words, they do not see it, or we do not see it in ourselves. It's completely invisible. And this is one of the characteristics of the unconscious, that if you are aware of it, that's not your shadow. Mm-hmm. You're aware of it. You might not like the certain traits that you have in your personality, but that's not your shadow because you're aware of them. You're conscious of them. It has to be unconscious. In other words, you cannot see it. It's a blind spot for you, for the individual. That's the importance of coaching right there, that if you do not have a coach, it's very difficult to do the work because you're working on the stuff that you still, let's say, you still feel like you're improving, you're making a better persona, you're polishing up a persona, all that stuff, but you're not really integrating the shadow. You're just remaining in your comfort zone.
When I first met you, you introduced me to the shadow. I didn't know. I was doing hypnotherapy and I was like kind of making everything positive and thinking I was working on this the unconscious, but the shadow is a lot deeper. And I remember I came home and I was so upset about this woman being mad at me, and you were saying that anger was my anger, and I'm like, I'm not an angry person. I'm nice. Aren't I nice, Rob? And you were like, well, just sit with the emotion that's going on. And then over like a couple of days, I just sat with the feeling that, I felt so upset that she was upset with me. And then it turned to anger, like, how dare her be upset with me? I'm right, she's wrong. And then all of a sudden I kind of connected it all to, it's like a kind of a map that you connect it to. It's not direct. And all of a sudden I got this idea, all the pleasing I've done in my life to make my clients happy. And then stuffing that anger, doing, not charging enough, putting up with not having boundaries and tolerating things. And all that anger was there. And if I didn't face it, I was like, oh, no, I'm a good spiritual woman. I'm not an angry person. The angry people are out there. It wasn't until I reclaimed that anger that I really got to see it's a passion. And when we say confront the shadow, we're confronting our own self that we don't want to look at. And I did not want to look at it. I did not. I resisted. And then all of a sudden, it gave me so much freedom because that's where the power was. I was so afraid of everyone else's anger that I ended up contorting myself into this pleaser that felt very tight and constricted. And I didn't have any freedom to really be, like you say, your true self. You're being a conditioned being, a conditioned persona in the world. And that's why a lot of people are anxious and stressed out because they're trying to keep up with the Joneses, keep up with their persona. And it causes a lot of physiological stress, exhaustion. It's exhausting to keep it up.
It is exhausting. And there is no satisfaction because you feel like an imposter. No matter how successful you become as persona, you intuitively know that it's not the real you, that you're not genuine. You're essentially playing a role. You're putting on the mask. You're hiding behind that mask. Now, let's see, what other things are important at this phase before we go on to how we
Well, I like to talk about the defenses because, the shadow has, the shadow stays hidden. So the ego has, I love what you say. It's like it has the codes, like the passwords. So you're trying to get into the locks and the ego knows. So it's like changing the password before you get there. So it's just like almost like a virus, that won't let you get into your computer. It's like, it's an inside, like it already knows where you're going to try to access it. So it creates barriers to it, not because it's evil or bad, but because it's you agreed that this was a bad thing. You, on some level, there's an agreement that you said, let's just put this in the shadow. Let's not deal with it. This is not good. So your ego's just doing its job. It's like, you told me to guard it. You told me to guard this stuff. So one of the things that I love about the shadow, and it's we talk about defenses, but my favorite defense, because it has such a cool name, is reaction formation. And it actually is when you react the opposite of how you feel, and you do it unconsciously. It's not like, oh, I'm going to act happy because I have to. It's almost like a response that's so undriven. So undriven consciously. So those of you who love Ted Lasso, our favorite show, great show on Apple TV. It has so many shadow psychological elements. It's really, really rich with a lot of metaphors for life and understanding the shadow. There's a lot of stories that reflect shadow elements. And so if you haven't seen it, it's really wonderful. But one of the characters is a woman that owns the football club. She married a very wealthy billionaire. He cheated on her all the time. She finally left him. She's the one who left. She got the football club, and it's just like kind of tension between the two of them. Like he's always needling her, and like married a younger woman, and like she's always like trying to keep up. She's all like pure and like, straight and perfectly dressed and always happy, like kind of keeping that positive vibe. And then every time she runs into him, she always says, "Oh, Rupert, how lovely to see you. What a lovely surprise." And she's always acting like this pleasant person, but inside she probably wants to just punch him in the face or, yell at him, but she can't. Like it's almost like an unconscious reaction. And that's that reaction formation. You're reacting opposite of how you feel. We've had clients say the same thing. They would run into their ex in the grocery store with their new girlfriend. And one girl said, I hugged the girl, like, "Hi, so nice to meet you." Even though the guy cheated on her and she was so angry at him, she was like, "Why did I act so friendly?" And it's like almost like we act in reverse as a defense. So that's our shadow. It's like keeping that anger, that aggression at bay. And so we don't have almost like a choice to how to react. So we have to pull from our persona and like make it even a hyper persona that reacts in that way. That's not truly how we feel.
Yes, it's a great defense mechanism, obviously, because it reinforces the persona and saying, I am the good person. I am the one that never gets angry, when inside, of course, is the anger.
And there's also displacement, which is another one. It's a lot of people heard the kicked a dog syndrome. You have this anger toward maybe someone in your past, and you're projecting it onto everyone else. Yeah. That also was from that show, the young, the guy that ran Nate. He was like the assistant, and they made him coach, and he was like really insecure. His father never gave him attention. His father was always hypercritical. And then Ted Lasso, played by Jason Sudeikis, is so positive and like empowering to him that he sees this father figure. And there's a scene, I won't give it away any of the details, but the scene is the young man, Nate, angry at Ted, like screaming at him, and really basically as if he was speaking to his father, like all the words he wanted to tell his father, but he's still thinking that Ted is the bad person and projecting it onto him. And how many times have we done that where we're mad at like something else, but we take it out on someone else, like our spouse or our partner, or our best friend, our boss, our team. We get kind of that misplaced or displaced projection.
That's right.
And we don't even do it consciously. It's unconscious.
It's unconscious. And that's the key, that it's unconscious, and therefore we're being played from the inside. The shadow,
the ego's playing us like a fiddle.
Again, it's not that the persona, the ego, or the shadow are bad. They're a natural way we live our lives. Everyone has to do this. But Jung says, but you can transcend it. You can go beyond that. And what he noticed was that a lot of the spiritual, psychological traditions of the past, that was their main purpose, was to help us understand that that's not all there is to us.
Well, that's what a lot of the rituals were about, is about facing the shadow and dealing with that.
Letting the old person die and burying. Some of the rituals were actually like going through a mock funeral of your old self, so that the new self could emerge. And people would get new names and kind of new identities, because that's not what you're meant to be doing. You're not meant to stay in the persona level of existence. So Jung says it's a very limiting, very restrictive, constricting way of being in the world if you continue to live as persona only. You'll start to feel anxious, feel depressed. That feeling that a lot of people report of that they're anxious about, like almost like something bad is going to happen. There's nothing wrong with their life, but they're continuously worrying
or a little depressed, kind of like or lack of like they feel like they're just living Groundhog Day, and lack of that vitality or purpose, and they feel like something's missing, and then they're looking for it out there. They like, let me find a new wife or a new husband, or let me find a new partner. Let me change jobs. That's what I did a lot. I kept changing jobs, like that. Maybe it's here, but I had to look within, and it's about looking within. Another thing I want to say before we move on to the last part is that, the shadow is not only the anger and negative stuff that we repress, but also our brilliance. And mostly, Jung says, in our shadow is our brilliance. Like, we have a golden shadow. It's all the things and our gifts that we aren't allowed to express, and that brilliance. And so what happens a lot too is that we project that brilliance onto other people. We see someone who's successful and we say, oh, they're so great. That's why celebrities have this kind of weird like energy, a vibe to them, because everyone's projecting their own divine energy onto these people. Like, they're special, I'm ordinary, they're special. And, when clients would tell me, like, thank you so much, you changed my life, and all those things, you can't get attached to that as a coach or as a teacher, because they're not really, they're seeing themselves through you. You're like understanding that. You don't want to carry the burden of that responsibility of being that bright light in their life all the time, or they will be disappointed. Eventually, your cracks are going to show. You're human. You're not this, glowing person. And that's, Wizard of Oz. The great, powerful Oz has his light and his beautiful, like, giant head, and then pull the curtain back, and there's this little man scared and nervous. Like, we don't want that curtain pulled. And so we have to come to terms as a leader, and those of you who are coaches or in the helping profession, remember, your clients will project that divinity, that power, that brilliance onto you, and you can't buy into it, because it will get you. It will. Then you have the burden of holding that up all the time, and it's exhausting to do that too. So it's exhausting pushing away your anger. It's exhausting, holding up some kind of perfection that other people seek, and that's really part of the shadow too. It's a lot of our beauty and our brilliance that we don't own ourselves. So confronting the shadow is confronting our own brilliance and really integrating and owning it, versus just keep projecting it onto other people.
Yeah, a lot of we work with very idealistic people that want to change the world for the better. But we tell them, you can't really change the world until you change yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't go out there projecting and thinking, I'm going to fix these people out there. You have to work with your inner shadow. You have to integrate the shadow, make it conscious, so that then you acquire free will. Mm-hmm. Because if you're being played from the inside, if you're essentially working out of defense mechanisms, out of adaptation, trying to fit in, always kind of playing to the shadow's need to be this way or that way, you don't really have free will. Free will means that you're able to see things as they truly are and make an informed decision as an adult now, not from your past conditioning. And that's what shadow integration allows us to do. It helps us really transform our point of view of the world. So it not only changes us inside, but it changes our perception of the world, the way we see it, the way we understand it.
What I think it really does is it kind of disrupts the ego and the persona. And so it is kind of intimidating for people, because there's comfort in your persona, and to disrupt it, it feels a little intimidating, but then it's like through destruction, we get creativity and freedom. And so we get out of that rigid state, and we're able to really be creative and innovative with our life and our decisions. And some people, I know, like when I first started doing shadow work, I thought, well, I'm going to be my shadow now. I'm going to be aggressive, and I'm going to keep my boundaries, and I'm going to be assertive and not be the pleaser anymore. And then what happened was it just persona swapped. It wasn't true integration. And true integration is that you are aware of both sides of the coin. You're aware that your persona wants to be this way. you know that your shadow is pushing that away, and you're seeing both sides and saying, making a conscious choice how you respond. And that is freedom. It's not that you're not driven by, I don't want to be my persona anymore. I don't want to be my shadow. We're like, I want to choose freely. And that's where all the possibilities are, because if we just stay in our persona, it's we have very little response choices. I mean, we can have a couple variations of strategies our ego can come up with, but it's very, very limited. There's only one or two ways, or maybe even three at max, that we can respond to life. And that's it. A fight, flight, or freeze. That's it. So if we be able to embrace our shadow, accept it, and really accept it, like at a deep level, like I've accepted my anger, I'm honoring my anger. I can now make a choice, because I know that when I'm angry, it's okay. Like, I'm not a bad person. It's just part of being human, and let me examine that versus let me shove it in a corner because I don't want to identify myself with that.
Yeah, so Jung says people will do the most ridiculous things to avoid facing their shadow, and we've all done it. We're not pointing fingers. We've all been.
Well,
there,
you
right?
have. I haven't.
where we'll do the most ridiculous things and try out different personas, create spiritual personas that kind of show the world that, hey, look, I'm a spiritual person. I'm not, I'm not pointing or projecting the shadow. But he says the real integration is so difficult because it threatens what we've created so far. It threatens our persona, essentially. And the persona or the ego is saying, why would you want to mess with it? Look how much time and energy I've spent protecting you, making sure you got here, and people respect you and people like you and all this stuff. And you want to now throw that away.
It's like you build this beautiful Lego thing with your kid, and you have a little city, and it's all set up, and then someone comes in and just knocks it apart. You're like, what? We just created this beautiful thing. Why would you want to destroy it? But if you look at the lamas in Tibetan lamas, they create those mandalas, and they, spend hours and hours, doing those little sand, filling in the colors and making this beautiful thing. And then as soon as it's done, they wipe it away. And that's kind of the way we need to be to really be free, because it's all about non-attachment. It's like, created this beautiful thing. Okay, let's destroy it. Let's create something new. So even if you love your persona, you love your personality, it is still limiting. Even if you feel confident, that is still limiting, because you're still identifying that I am a confident person. So in the shadow is this scared, insecure person that you've never met, but you meet them out there in the world and you think, oh, that's them, not me. And you don't realize really on that subtle level how much that pushing that insecurity away or denying that part of yourself really runs your life. And it comes in this, like, you need to be perfect. Like people that have perfectionism, it's like scary to like admit you're wrong. And it's, there's so much pressure. And then, but you think that's just the way it should be. You should be confident. You should be this. And it's actually endearing when you're the opposite.
Yeah. So if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first 3 or 4 levels, right? They're all about survival, which is ego, and social acceptance, which is persona. The higher ones, beyond those levels, self-actualization, they cannot be reached if you hold on to your persona. And so the integration of the shadow allows you to do that higher work, to live at a higher level. Because if you're only surviving, if you're only interested in, and all your energy is going towards socially fitting in, you're not really living. You're simply existing, and you're being an acceptable person. You're part of the state, part of the society, and you're respected and all that. But that's not the ultimate aim of human life. If again, Jung was looking for something that matched the transcendent power of ritual, of spiritual transformation. How can we do that as modern human beings and still keep our let's say, our way of seeing the world through our scientific lens, but still be able to access those deeper realms of the psyche. And individuation, he says, is the way to do it. The shadow integration is the first step because it shows us in a very direct, very personal way that there's more to us than the mask and the persona that we're wearing. It shows us that there's this living, intelligent, unconscious mind underneath the surface that if we pay attention to it, it gives us another dimension to our human existence.
Yes, it's really profound, and it goes beyond just the basic, just thinking positive and manifestation. Like, this is becoming true, stepping into true transformation, becoming something other than what you're used to being. And I think when you do this work, you get surprised at how powerful you are. You get surprised with the depth of spirit you are. And it really is very rewarding. But the first step, it's like an initiation to do the shadow work. And if you felt like you haven't gone through the initiation yet, like I said, if you aren't sure if you've done enough shadow work, you probably haven't, because it really is, it is challenging. It's like taking a marathon inside. You're working with all the defenses. It's like you're pushing through, and it's like a rebirth of who you are. It's like taking the things that were not working anymore, wrestling with them, and just kind of becoming free of them. It's such a beautiful process. And we invite you all to do it, because it's going to be the ticket to freedom. And so the next episode, we will be talking about what comes after the shadow and why we continue. We want to not stop at shadow work. That's just the preview, the preview for your life. Just watching the previews. When we get into beyond the shadow, we enter the realm of the collective unconscious.
Yeah, the whole the idea of the archetypal realm of the collective unconscious is really Jung's masterpiece. What he wanted to leave us with was a map of the psyche, a complete map of the psyche, just like we see the universe extending externally, into infinity, essentially. He says the same process going on internally. In the psyche is the balancing part of that external world that we see out there.
So whatever you could imagine with that new telescope they have that goes into sees other galaxies, billions of galaxies, and imagine how vast space is. Your inner space is just as vast and even more. I mean, that's all we can see. So there's just such a great entry point. Jung said that the shadow work is the apprentice piece, and actually working with the anima animus and the collective unconscious is the masterpiece. So stay tuned next week, where we go deeper into the unconscious with Jungian shadow work and Jungian coaching. And we'll see you next week. Just one more reminder, click the subscribe button below before you leave, and make sure you don't miss another episode. If you are listening to us on the podcast services such as Spotify and iTunes, make sure you hit subscribe and tune in every week for a new deep episode on your mind and making your life amazing.